Hey y'all, it's Tink, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the Alpine Loop Backcountry Byway, which is a 4x4 route out in southwestern Colorado. We began this route by starting in Silverton, Colorado, and heading up to Ouray, then over to Lake City, and finally back down through the Handy's Peak Wilderness area back to Silverton. I did this drive over 4 days, stopping for hikes and some sightseeing along the way. This video is going to be broken up into 4 major parts, kind of detailing the 4 days of the trek that we made in my 4Runner, starting now with day 1. Day 1 was probably the most interesting and also the most difficult day of the entire drive. This route, starting in Silverton and heading up into Animas Forks, is pretty straightforward. I really think that most passenger cars with a decent level of clearance would be able to drive this section of the trail. I did it in the 4Runner and had no issues all the way to Animas Forks. There's a couple of bumpy areas and a couple of spots where there's some washouts and maybe some small boulders that you have to get over, but really any reasonable car could make it down this section of the road. I think that probably for the duration of this drive, both Levon and I, Levon, my traveling partner on this trip, we were just absolutely blown away by the scenery. It was just breathtaking views around every corner. Now, that doesn't come without a little bit of trepidation. As you can see, even on the smooth section of the trail, you've got really steep drop-offs on either side. There's no guardrails, no protection. You really have to know how to handle your vehicle and kind of know what you're doing and have your wits about you to be able to drive any part of this road. But if you have those things, you could probably get down this, I would say, easily in like a Ford F-150. Our friends did it on the second day with us in an F-150. A RAV4. I used to drive a Ford Escape, and that probably would have made it down this first section of the road. I would not attempt to do it in a passenger car, but an SUV or a truck with some clearance and not necessarily with heavy duty 4x4 capability could drive this part of the trail. Now, it is important to note, once you're on the Alpine Loop, there are not any amenities or gas stations. You need to bring in everything that you'll need. You will find some pit toilets along the way. Those are pretty easy to find. There's a few that are kind of on these little spur roads, and then there's another one at Animas Forks, which you can see in the video here. Animas Forks is kind of the big touristy destination along this route. It's an old mining city. There's a lot of history here and a lot of information about the people who lived here, the people who founded the camp, etc. So it was a really cool place to see. Now, our real fun began on day 1 after we left Animas Forks, and I'm using the word fun here to mean something other than actual fun. Leaving Animas Forks and heading on up toward Engineer Pass, the road does get a little bit more hairy. It's more narrow. The drop-offs are steeper. And there's these tight switchback turns, which you can see some in the video here. Now, what we did was, instead of making a right-hand turn and continuing on up Engineer Pass, we made a left-hand turn at some point and continued down County Road 18 toward the town of Ouray. I was stopped at a sign that said, "Experienced 4x4 drivers only beyond this point." I am not an experienced 4x4 driver, and I was prepared to turn around. However, the guys in these trucks that you see ahead of us said, "Come on, girl, you got this." I did not, in fact, have this. I was way out of my league and had no business being on this road. Now, the video quality is going to decrease a little bit at this point because once we were on this bottom portion of County Road 18/Engineer Pass, the road quickly deteriorated so badly that I was honestly afraid I was going to break my car, and I kind of did. We ended up breaking all 4 of the side steps on my 4Runner while we were on this road. It was way over my skill level as an off-road driver at this point. And to do over again, I would 100% not have gone down this way if I had known how bad it was. But we were probably halfway down it before we hit the point where we were like, man, we really shouldn't have done this. And by that point, it was really too late to turn around. There was no good place to turn around. And we would have just been busy doing kind of the same thing going up as we had just been doing down. So it didn't seem like a more appealing idea to turn around versus keep going. So we kept going very slowly. Both of us were way too nervous about the drive to really pay attention to getting decent videos. So most of the videos you see here were actually taken by Levon through the front windshield or by Levon standing outside of the car and scouting our route down. Throughout the, I think, nearly 4 hours that we spent on this section of the trail, one of us was outside of the car scouting almost the entire time due to the rough nature of the roads. We did end up passing a family on side-by-sides that told us that they didn't think that we would make it to the bottom because we didn't have enough clearance, and I'm in a 4Runner, if that tells you anything. So it was really a hair-raising experience. I was stressed to the max, and I think that Levon was also pretty stressed out. I'm super thankful that he was willing to drive part of the time and take some of the pressure off of me, because honestly, I don't know if my nerves could have handled driving all the way down. What we were dealing with was mostly and thankfully dry ground, but lots of rocks, lots of boulders, lots of steep drop-offs, lots of hairpin turns, lots of really, really narrow sections of road. And what you're going to see in these videos is really only a fragment of what we actually experienced, because during the rougher parts of the drive, neither one of us were able to video. We were just worried about getting down the mountain safely. Levon and I had pretty much decided by the time that we got off of this stretch of road that there was absolutely no way we were coming back on this section of road the next day, even if it meant we didn't finish the Alpine Loop. Thankfully, we were able to connect with someone at the local outfitter once we got down into Ouray, and they told us about an alternative route to get back on the loop that was a lot less gnarly. When we walked into the outfitter and told him what road we'd been on, he exclaimed, "That's the worst road in the entire county." And I'm inclined to agree with him. I cannot express the amount of joy that I felt whenever I saw this parking lot at the end of this horrible, horrible road, even though we ended up scraping my side steps right before we got to the parking lot. Levon and I were just both overjoyed to see pavement and be off of the Alpine Loop, if not for more than a few hours. Once we were finally off the Alpine Loop for the day, we headed down into the town of Ouray to meet up with my friends Marietta and David. I actually met up with Marietta on the Appalachian Trail in 2015, and we hiked together for quite some time, and we've been pretty regular adventure partners ever since. David is her partner, and we've hung out several times with all of us, and we all get along great. So we met up with them at camp. We just not stealth camped, but we just dispersed camped at a campground outside of Ouray for the night with Marietta and David, and then the next day we headed back out onto the Alpine Loop. We got some intel from the guy at the outfitter that told us that the way we came down was the worst road in the county, but there was a way better way to get back on the loop than what we'd used to get down. He recommended going back up Corkscrew Gulch, which, though it has a little bit of a daunting name, was 100% better of a road than County Road 18/Engineer Pass, which we came down. So, moving into day 2, Marietta and David joined us on the Alpine Loop. They drive a pretty souped-up F-150, and it handled the rest of the Alpine Loop really flawlessly. They stayed on it for 2 days with us before heading back to Denver, and then We actually ended up repeating part of the trail that we had done the day before and meeting up with my buddy Matthew, who lives in Durango, once we hit Animas Forks that day. This time after leaving Animas Forks, we all headed up Engineer Pass Road. And instead of turning left onto that horrible county road, we continued right and ended up at Engineer Pass, the actual high point of the Alpine Loop. Crossing over that was absolutely breathtaking. Honestly, I don't have that much video because I was just so immersed in the moment, and I drove most of this day, so Levon caught a few videos from inside the car, but otherwise you're going to just have to settle for these kind of stellar photos that I added in here. Leaving Engineer Pass, we parted ways with Matthew. He headed back down towards Silverton to get home. He was on a dirt bike, and the weather was looking like it might turn, so he needed to get down and off the mountain. We had the advantage of being in cars, so we were a little bit more protected from the elements, and Levon and I in my car, and Marietta and David in their truck headed all the way into Lake City. We did decide to stop along the way and take a quick dip in an absolutely incredible waterfall, and then headed into the town of Lake City, where we experienced a thunderstorm and hailstorm before finding our campsite for the night. After spending the night at Williams Creek Campground, we decided to head out on day 3 of the Alpine Loop. Marietta and David had to head back to Denver today, but Levon and I were headed further into the backcountry. Our goal for the night was to camp in American Basin for a summit attempt at Handy's Peak, which is a Colorado 14er, the following day. So we continued back on the Alpine Loop, headed in the general direction of Silverton, but not making it all the way to Silverton on day 3. Anybody else probably would have done this entire section in one day if you weren't stopping to do a hike like we did. We decided to break it into 2 days so that we would have time for that hike. Levon and I did stop on the 3rd day for a short hike up at Cooper's Creek Trail. We were trying to hike to a lake, didn't make it because of a thunderstorm, and then drove on to American Basin, where we camped for the night and did a sunrise summit of Handy's Peak the next day. Honestly, by this point, we were both so sick of being on the Alpine Loop that neither of us were taking very much video. So all I have from the last couple of days really are photos, but honestly, this drive was just so utterly and just jaw-droppingly beautiful and stunning around every bend that it was almost like oversaturation of views. Highly recommend doing this drive if you have a vehicle that can do it. 3 days would have been a really great time frame for it. I know people do parts of it and just spend a day out there, and people do the whole thing sometimes in one day. I just think that would kind of maybe be a lot more than what I would be able to do in a day, because the bits that we did were a little bit exhausting. As I mentioned, we easily could have combined the 3rd and 4th day into one if we weren't stopping for hikes along the way, but that was part of the reason we were out there. So we had a great time. Anyway, if you have any questions about the Alpine Loop, feel free to drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. Bye.